Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to share my experience of plain language summaries from a caregiver's perspective. My name's Rachel, and as well as being a mum of two beautiful children, I'm also a proud patient advocate, public advisor in medical research, and a charity founder. This photograph was taken in Royal Manchester Children's Hospital shortly after we'd found out that our son's cancer had reactivated. You'll note that it looks like I'm having a great time. I'd managed to squeeze myself into the surgical gown that my son was to wear to have his portacath fitted, partly to distract him from his own nerves and partly to distract myself and my husband from ours. We were back on the roller coaster that nobody asks to ride. I want to talk to you today about what was going on in the background and how this relates to the importance of good quality, clear, concise, and no jargon plain language summaries. My experience with plain language summaries started 3 years before this photo was taken. Our eldest son was diagnosed with diabetes insipidus first, and then Langerhans cell histiocytosis, or LCH for those of you who like an acronym. I was told not to turn to Dr. Google by a well-meaning endocrinologist, but my inner control freak ignored this advice and set about looking for info on this disease. I found myself awake most nights, poring over research papers, reading about research conducted around the world into both diabetes insipidus and LCH. I must stress here that I'm not a medical professional. In fact, I scraped a pass in my GCSEs, in school, in science, by the skin of my teeth, and I spent most lessons messing about with Bunsen burners in the science labs. I found myself reading plain language summaries and then having to Google words in them that I didn't understand. Not very plain, really. When you've just been told your baby boy will need to commence yet another chemotherapy protocol, your emotions are heightened. You may enter shock, your capacity for processing technical information and language is diminished. And even if you are a clever clogs in normal circumstances, it becomes quite difficult. I'm glad to share that my son's second round of treatment was successful and he's had no active disease for the last 4 years. Once I'd processed his relapse, I was inspired to reach out to the people who were conducting research out of sight from the public and to see how I could get involved and help them to make it more accessible to stressed, overwhelmed, and frankly terrified mums, dads, caregivers like me. So who should write them? I'm passionate that this should be a partnership between researchers, medics, young people, patients, and caregivers. Initial drafts completed by the team conducting the research, and then an open dialogue with people who are at grassroots and ultimately who the plain language summary is for. So, why are they important? I touched on this before, but often a life-changing diagnosis will have varying degrees of impact on a patient and their caregiver's mental health and well-being. If we think about plain language summaries through that lens, we must make sure that they're clear, concise, and easy to digest. I've recently witnessed how AI tools can help with this by prompting things like, write this so a 7-year-old can understand it. And I'm absolutely on board with that. From my point of view, my son had lots of questions when he relapsed, questions that I had too, and I couldn't find the answers to. And I couldn't understand myself when those answers did pop up when I used Google. And I think that academics, pharma companies, and researchers have an important role to play in the patient journey and can influence change by asking themselves, could a 7-year-old understand this? To finish, I wanted to share a few photos of Jack. This is him on the way to hospital on the bus ride in. He wanted to get a bus when he was 3 years old, when he'd just been diagnosed. The second photograph was ahead of his relapse, and the most recent photograph was taken on a family holiday. I'd like to thank everybody for listening today and hope that you've been able to take something useful from my experience.